So good, so good, so good.
Ready to rack to school and save big? Get to your Nordstrom Rack store today for thousands of deals from just $20.
Because I want to look fresh.
How did I not know Rack has Adidas?
I got a new backpack.
Score everyone's favorite denim, sneakers, boots, and activewear from Nike, Levi's, Steve Madden, Madewell, and Free People. Great brands, great prices. Everyone's got a reason to rack. Shop Nordstrom Rack and make it the best school year ever.
This Friday, Jamie Lee Curtis and Lindsay Lohan are back to switch things up in Disney's Freakier Friday.
OMG, yes.
It's an absolute riot,
Woo!
and the only movie that can be described as
So much weirder than the last time. What last time?
it's the frequel
You ready?
we've been waiting for.
That absolutely slays.
What deeply out-of-touch old person came up with that?
You did.
Wow.
Don't miss the comedy event of the summer for all ages. Disney's Freakier Friday, in theaters this Friday. Get tickets now. Rated PG. Parental guidance suggested.
This episode is brought to you by the world's first reposado from Tequila Herradura. Made with slow-cooked, hand-harvested agave sealed into oak barrels and aged 11 months. Before being enjoyed in your glass. Experience the world's first reposado. Tequila Herradura. Please drink responsibly. Responsibility.org. Tequila Herradura. 40% alcohol by volume. Imported by Brown-Forman, Louisville, Kentucky. Herradura is a registered trademark. Copyright 2025 Brown-Forman Corporation.
Pie in the Sky Media. This series contains adult language and descriptions of graphic violence throughout. Listener discretion is advised. All individuals mentioned in this podcast are presumed innocent unless proven guilty in a court of law. And the opinions of guests featured on Criminal Mischief are their own and do not necessarily represent those of the show.
Dina Rush, missing person advocate, is what I say now, just a missing person advocate. I didn't know Joni personally. People always think I did, but I never met her in real life, or in this life anyway. I'm never sure how to say that, but I overheard something 40 years ago that has kind of just put her into my universe, and I feel like she's been there ever since, spiritually, and that this is just my job, and I have to do this, and I have to see it through to the end.
In October of 1983, Dina was just 19 years old. She was walking down the sidewalk with two of her best friends in Seaside, Oregon, a beach town that was popular with tourists. Dina vividly remembers a moment in time that would change her life forever, as a few girls from Warrenton High School walked toward them. Warrenton was a working-class town about 14 miles away.
Small coastal beach town, fishing town, very big fishing town at the northernmost part of the Oregon coast, right at the Columbia River Bar, close to the Columbia River Bar. But if you go inward, eastward, there's a lot of logging roads and a lot of mountainous region and trees. Very big. Crown Zellerback had a huge presence back there in the 1980s. A small beach town, and it's Warrenton wasn't so much then. Seaside and Cannon Beach were more the tourist areas at that time. It's where, Goonies, the beloved film Goonies. Yeah.
So Warrenton, it sounds like it's a working.
Yes, exactly. It was more of a blue collar town. And I think they have more tourists now than they did. But back in 83, it was just, it was the other towns in the southern part of the county were known for their tourism.
So Dina and her two girlfriends are walking toward these girls from Warrenton.
These three girls that we knew were from Warrenton, but I didn't know them, but I think they had a shirt or possibly a Letterman's jacket on. I can't even remember now, but I could even tell you what I was wearing though still. But there was some of that teenage girl about, seaside sluts. And we were like back, you were frats, just teenage nonsense, teenage girl nonsense. And one of them said something that made my blood run cold. One said to the other two, they think they're so cool, just like Joan Hall did. And then they all laughed. And it was that moment that ended up defining a lot of my life.
The girls were referring to Joan, or Joanie Hall, who went to Warrenton High School. and Joni had disappeared on September 30th, 1983. And when the girl made the comment, Dina knew that Joan Hall had been missing for a week. Now, she didn't know Joni, but in that moment, she was struck by not only what they said, but how they said it. And it wasn't normal.
It was malevolent. It was malicious. She'd only been missing a week, so supposedly nobody knew at that time. They were speaking about her in the past tense. They were speaking
sounds
about
like
her.
people, from just based on that comment, that people knew something, because from what I have read about Joni, it sounds like she was she wanted to be a police officer. She was in the Explorers. She was a tutor for children.
Yes, she was a good girl. She wanted to do good things and help people.
Dina recalls being so distraught by the cruel comment that even though she'd been planning to go to the movies with her friends, she just had to get home.
I said to my dad, I overheard this. And I think there's probably too that gut part of me that just knew something was wrong. There's something's off. Even though I couldn't define it, something was off with this, how they said it, how malicious they were, what a mean thing it was to say about a missing classmate. It was so cruel, and they got such glee out of laughing about it. Mm-hmm. And I said, Dad, I have to go to the police. And he's like, no, Dina, you got to stay out of this. And my parents were always, if there's something wrong, I was a Girl Scout. I was raised that way. My parents were the greatest generation. They were older, and I was always taught. But my dad was very, one of the few times actually in my whole life, I saw him be real strict about you got to stay out of this. You have got to stay out of this. Because, and now being older with my own child and grandchildren, I understand where he was coming from. I think he knew that there was something very off in the entire situation, and that there's already one missing girl. Do not go, going around playing Nancy Drew, and because it could not have been safe. It might not be safe.
Dina would listen to her father, and she left it alone. But she never forgot what had happened to Joni and what those girls had said to her that day and how they said it. But she wouldn't stay quiet forever.
The sister was quoted as saying that Joni's disappearance is Warrenton's dirty little secret.
Yep.
Talk a little
bit.
She
said Joni's a little dirty secret. She was going to, she thought that Joni knew a lot more of things that she shouldn't have known, possibly. Mm-hmm.
Welcome back to Criminal Mischief with Carolyn and Brandon. You're listening to episode 94. The Disappearance of Joan Hall. The Friday night lights were blazing brightly at Warrenton High School on September 30th, 1983. Who the Warriors were playing that evening was the furthest thing from Chuck Hall's mind. He was there, searching for his baby sister, Joan. He wasn't alone. Other family members were there too, scanning the crowds. Joan was 17 and the youngest of 5 children. She was a senior at Warrenton High School. Chuck was scared as his eyes furtively darted back and forth, desperate to see his sister's brown hair, blue eyes, and smiling face. There was still hope. His mother told him that before Joan had left for school that morning, she'd been wearing white Nikes with a maroon stripe, a blue nylon jacket, a blue and white duffel-type book bag, and a brown cloth purse with a long shoulder strap. Not seeing Joan, Chuck found the next best thing, the Warrenton Chief of Police, Bill Humphrey, who just happened to be at the game. And he went up to him and told him that his sister was missing. He explained that after school, Joan was supposed to have walked from Warrenton High School at 2 p.m. to the nearby elementary school, where her Aunt Ruth was a 3rd grade teacher. Every day after school, Joan helped grade papers with her aunt, who would then give her a ride home. But on that day, Joan never showed up, and she never came home. The family had come to the football game that night because Joan had told them that she planned on going to the game. Chief Humphrey would speak to a student that night. His name is Mike Moore, who said that he'd given Joan a ride from school at about 2:10 to the Warrenton Mini Mart, and that was the last he'd seen of her. By 11 o'clock that night, Joan's parents, Melvin and Mary, were speaking with the Clatsop County Sheriff's deputy. They filed a missing persons report on their daughter. The family lived outside the city of Warrenton, which is why they reported her missing to the sheriff's office. The deputy who took that report was named Gerald Bash, and Joan's mother Mary made it clear to Deputy Bash that Joan wouldn't run away. In fact, she had been extremely happy because the night before, she'd just been voted as president of the Law Enforcement Explorer Troop for the Clatsop County Sheriff's Department. It's a volunteer program designed for young men and women to receive experience in and exposure to law enforcement careers. Even though Joan wasn't one of their own, she wanted to be, but she would never get that opportunity because in the days and weeks following Joan's disappearance, they wouldn't find her body or her belongings. It was like she vanished without a trace. This has been the story for 40 years. But recently, documents have been released that paint a very different picture.
Over the years, there was lots of investigatory work, but I would describe it as, look, there's a squirrel type of things. Some guy would, a criminal would come to town and they'd be doing something and they'd say, well, we should look at him for Joan Hall. So then they'd run off and do that for a while. Mm-hmm. And instead of the obvious facts that happened at roughly 3:00 in the afternoon on September 30th, 1983 at the Mini Mart.
That's Dean, who has been instrumental in getting files related to Joni's case released to the public.
Okay, my name's Dean Andal. I'm a retired California legislator.
Before we get to what was in Joni's investigation files, let's get to why. Why would a retired congressman from California get involved in a missing persons case from 40 years ago?
There's two things that kind of fell together at the same time. I live in Stockton, California, and I'm close to a family that lost their daughter in a similar case, Kristen Smart. They're friends of mine. Kristen was from Stockton, where this is her hometown, and it was almost 25 years, I believe, before that case was solved. And I saw the power of the podcaster, young man with no journalism experience, but just really a lot of innate ability, I think, and a drive to solve the case. And he did an amazing thing, and they caught the person, and they haven't found the body yet, but he's in jail. That's something I followed for years, and I had a small role in it when I was a legislator. And then I'm an 8th generation Oregonian. I was born in Salem, but I've lived my whole life in California. And my mother and father moved back to Oregon about 8 years ago to retire in Wilsonville. They're still there. My mother is a former stringer when she was raising us as a journalist, and so she's a very curious person. She had a relative that lived in Warrenton, right down the block from where Joan Hall was taken. And he was a retired state police officer who got interested in the case after he retired. And he told her, and she got interested. And so for years, she's bewildered me and my brothers and sisters with the story of Joan Hall and wouldn't let go of it and wanted me to help her. And so when I retired 2 years ago, I decided to look at her big file that she had collected. It was full of questions. A lot of things didn't make sense, what law enforcement did, the crazy situation. And my mother had a bunch of questions, but not very many answers.
So Dean, on behalf of his mother, makes a public disclosure request for the documents in Joni's case. Now, you've got to remember, Dean's been a public servant for many years and was very familiar with making public disclosure requests. And when he made this request more than a year ago, he fully expected to get the documents because of the age of the case.
It was a simple request. I thought the case is 40 years old. What could possibly be secret about it at this point? And I got just a blunt reply. No, you can't have it. There's this court order that says you can't have the documents.
Dean was not happy, especially when he discovered that a judge had placed a protective order on the 5 boxes that were the sum total of the Joan Hall missing person investigation.
if a protective order is placed on an investigation file, the maximum amount of time that it can be kept from the public is 75 years. So it's a default. So if there was no further action by a judge to release it would stay that way for 75 years. This actually happened in 2018. So over 30 years after the investigation. And it was prompted by one of the detectives in the Clatsop County Sheriff's Department who wrote a 2-page affidavit to the judge that said, we don't think these files should be released. We think that it might tip off suspects, might compromise our investigation. And the judge did not conduct a hearing, did not notify the public or the family. And so it was just signed with no review. And I think what really bothered my brother and I, one of the reasons we proceeded with the court effort to get the protective order off, was under Oregon law, you can't just say, here's 5 boxes and we're not going to let the public see any of it. You actually have to go through each document and say, this document can't be seen, but this one can. And none of that effort was made by the judge. There's no evidence she even looked at the files.
So don't let that mild-mannered tone of voice lull you into thinking our story ends here. This was just the beginning for Dean and his brother.
I didn't like that answer, so my brother and I decided we would make a pro se challenge, which without lawyer. We both have quite a bit of legal experience. He actually became a lawyer about the same time as this process in California, but we're neither one of us are lawyers by trade. And we just researched the law, filed documents with the court, and the more we got into the research, we could tell that it just was not permissible to say no. I mean, there was a lot of reasons why the documents should not have been shielded from the public.
According to Dean, in Oregon, there's a presumption that anything 25 years or over is releasable. And if it's not, it's on the burden of the government to prove that there's an ongoing investigation that's going on and that releasing these documents would somehow harm the case if they did.
But if you go to court and test it, it's their burden, the government's burden, to explain why the record should be kept private. And so they have to do that. Most people, they don't usually get called on it very often because most people either don't have the know-how or the resources to go to court.
A portion of those 5 boxes was released.
We actually got the record, some of the records from the sheriff in January.
So were all the records that were released, was it everything in those 5 boxes?
No. For both for convenience sake and expense reasons, because the person who, as you know, the person who asks for the files has to pay for the copying and that business. So in discussions with the sheriff, he told us that there's a detective's handbook on the Joan Hall investigation. It's a binder. I can show you a copy of it. It's on the noted here. And that's what the Clatsop County Major Crimes Team uses when they discuss the case from time to time. There are actually 5 boxes full of materials, but the sheriff, in our discussions, he said that what they thought were the most relevant documents were in this binder. But there are more documents available.
And what they would find in that binder would be shocking on many levels. Woohoo! My kids are gearing up to head back to school. But it's a little sad because it also means that lazy days are over. Pretty soon they won't be able to just yell down the hall to get in touch with me, or vice versa. Now that I'm thinking about it, it'll be coordinating pickups and after-school plans, plus making sure everyone is where they're supposed to be, which is why it's making even more sense for my kids to have the same tech that I do, so they can help with a little bit of the heavy lifting. But when it comes to my younger kids, it's daunting to think about all the stuff they could access on a smartphone. It's not good for them. And I worry about cyberbullying because it's happened to one of my kids in the past when they were in middle school. That was a nightmare. But I found a solution, which is why I want to tell you about Gab's back to school sale. Gab is the leader in safe smartphones and watches for kids, teens, and tweens. So if you're on the fence, like I was, about getting my kid a cell phone, Gab is a fabulous option because they don't have social media apps or an internet browser, but it does come with GPS tracking, so you'll know where your kid is at all times. Now, you might be thinking, why would my tween want this? Trust me, Gab phones and watches still have tech that kids want, like unlimited talk and text. But here's the thing. Gab Messenger blocks high-risk messages and content with nudity from ever reaching your child's phone. Gab also has hundreds of third-party apps that can be installed at parents' discretion. We just got the latest edition, the Gab Phone 4 Pro, which has more features than ever before. And having this device with these parental controls built in, I think is going to be a game changer for us this year. Because I want my tween to have a phone so I can keep in contact with him when I need to be. And he doesn't feel left out and is able to talk and text with his friends about schoolwork and hangouts. Which is why I really think Gab is a must-have this year, and I can't recommend enough that you and your family give them a try. And right now is the perfect time because Gab is offering huge discounts on phones and watches to new customers. The best part? There's no contract required. Just go to gab.com/mischief to get started. That's Gab, GABB.com/mischief. Gab.com/mischief. Terms and conditions apply.
It's Wednesday, Adams. I see you're trying to distract yourself from your own banal thoughts. Let me help. Here's a recording thing made of my latest root canal.
Wednesday, Season 2, begins August 6th, only on Netflix.
On WhatsApp, no one can see or hear your personal messages. Whether it's a voice call, message, or sending a password. To WhatsApp, it's all just this. So whether you're sharing the streaming password in the family chat or trading those late-night voice messages that could basically become a podcast, your personal messages stay between you, your friends, and your family. No one else. Not even us. WhatsApp. Message privately with everyone.
So earlier I mentioned that Clatsop County Sheriff's Deputy Gerald Bash took the missing persons report from Joni's mother.
The best way I can explain this quickly is I would divide this into 3 generations of police officers because this is a 40-year period. In the beginning, the investigation was clearly compromised and by Deputy Sheriff Gerald Bash. He may be a person of interest in the case. There's a lot wrong with what he did. I think over the years the public didn't know because they didn't have access to these files. But just to go through it, I mean, some of the key suspects in the case, I guess I should call them persons of interest. Some are still alive. Were young men, one of whom was his son. He investigated the case anyway. He knew the victim really well. This was not known until, some research by Dina Rush's group till recently, but Gerald Bash and Mike Bash were neighbors of Joan Hall. He was the advisor to the Explorer Post that she was the president of. He gave her rides to post meetings. So the Bashes, both father and son, and Mike Bash went to school with her, of course. They knew her well, so he using most police protocols would not allow a police officer with that close of a tie to investigate the case.
So you met Dina Rush earlier, and if you'll recall, she had a run-in with some of those girls from Warrenton High School 40 years ago that she just never forgot. And as I said, she listened to her dad and she didn't get involved. She didn't tell police about what she'd heard from those girls. But around 2006, she started a page on MySpace because she just didn't want Joni to be forgotten. And eventually, she moved Joni's page over to Facebook, where it's been for the last 12 years. And it's become a place where people share information with her. And today, Dina believes that because of the release of these records, combined with the information that her group has been able to get through her page, it might lead to a breakthrough in the case.
I overheard something 40 years ago that has kind of just put her into my universe, and I feel like she's been there ever since spiritually, and that this is just my job, and I have to do this, and I have to see it through to the end. Have the momentum build and actually get somewhere after all these years is just blows my mind sometimes, but I think we're going to find her.
We'll get to that new information in a bit, but for now, let's go over the timeline from Joan's disappearance through the lens of these newly released records. So Joan was reported missing by her mother at 11 p.m. to the Clatsop County Sheriff's Department. The case was assigned there because the Hall family lived in Astoria, which is that department's jurisdiction. During the initial investigation, it was reported that Joan had been given a ride to the mini-mart by Michael Moore at 2:10 p.m. And according to a subsequent interview with Moore, he would say that Joan had told him that she was going to walk to Warrenton Elementary School, which was about a half a mile away from the mini-mart. So according to a police report dated May 12, 2014, under Action Taken, it says, upon reviewing the reports, it appears the first notification to law enforcement about Joan Hall possibly being missing was a contact with the Warrenton police chief at a Friday night football game. That this took place at approximately 6:30 p.m. The chief went back to Joan's family, who was waiting for him by the gate, and informed the brother what he'd found out about Mike Moore giving Joan a ride to the mini-mart. And according to his report, he would say that there was only a short time which was devoted to locating the victim at this time due to the time frame of when she supposedly disappears. He further writes, over the remaining part of the weekend, I was informed by Deputy Bash that she had still not been located and that they were attempting to still locate her. Again, if you'll recall, Deputy Gerald Bash with the Clatsop County Sheriff's Office had taken a missing persons report Friday night at 11 p.m. from Joan's mother. And it's odd because a young girl goes missing. She's just been voted as president of the Young Explorers Club, which is a law enforcement sponsor group. And it's been identified that she has nothing in her history to suggest that she would run away. And yet, it sounds like only one officer is looking for her. Deputy Gerald Bash.
Which he came on shift at 11 p.m., took the report from Joni's mom, and then was driving around in the middle of the night looking for her. I guess he expected her to see her out in the middle of the old logging roads. But at 11 o'clock and then through that night, which would have been into Saturday, early Saturday morning, he was sure traveling those logging roads. And I just don't know what you expect to see out there. It is still dark and creepy out there at night. There weren't, unless, in the past several years, unless they put a bunch of lights up out there. Those old roads, like Lewis and Clark Main Line was one that the Crown Zeller back roads went off of. He said that he traveled that. I don't know what you would expect to see out there in the middle of the night.
According to Deputy Bash's report, on Saturday, October 1st, and then Sunday, and then Monday, he spent his time patrolling remote and/or areas not traveled too often along the coast and logging roads. Then on Tuesday, an anonymous person calls Joan's aunt and in a muffled voice says, "They haven't checked the airport." It was early in the morning and the aunt said, "What?" And the caller repeated, "They haven't checked the airport." And so on Tuesday, there was a massive search of the airport, which Deputy Bash attended. And after that, according to his report, it says he searched Warrenton City Park and port property. It wasn't until Wednesday that Deputy Bash says he and Warrenton Chief of Police, Bill Humphrey, went to Warrenton High School to speak to the students. Essentially, Chief Humphrey makes an announcement over the intercom system saying if anyone has any information that they want them to come forward. Deputy Bash would write in his report that at 11:25 a.m., a kid named Jim Sears would come into the office. Now, Jim initially says that he saw Joan last at his house with Mike Moore at approximately 4 to 4:30 p.m. Apparently, Mike stops off at his house. He's got grease all over his hands. He says that it's because he's been working on his car. But then after that, Deputy Bash would write, this statement was later changed. That was it. At 11:37, Deputy Bash writes that another kid named Michael Bash would come in and stated essentially the same thing as Jim Sears, that Mike was with Jim Sears at his house, that Joan had been in Mike's car. But then, after this statement, Deputy Bash would write, Michael's statement was also changed later. No additional information is written about these changed statements in his report, or that Michael Bash is actually Deputy Gerald Bash's son. So then at 11:45, a kid named Gary Lear was interviewed. And he says that he was also with Jim Sears and that Mike Moore had pulled up and Joan Hall was in the car. But then Gary's statement would also change. All three would change their statements to say that a girl named Teresa Woods was in the car, not Joan Hall.
So the story has been for 40 years that Jimmy Sears, and this is according to Sears and Bash, Mike Bash and Lear, that they had got out of school and drove around for a while and then went to the Dairy Maid, and we have found no evidence yet of any interviews of anybody at the Dairy Maid. And then they went back to Jimmy's house where Mike Moore stopped by with Joni between 4 and 4:30, which also doesn't fit with the timeline, and stopped by Sears' house, and that Sears' mom could verify that. I don't know if she was ever asked.
Bash's report doesn't explain why these kids changed their statements, saying that the girl that Mike was with wasn't Joan, but was another girl, Teresa Woods. And there doesn't appear to be a witness interview with Teresa Woods corroborating that she was in Mike's car that day.
Teresa tragically was murdered in an unrelated incident in 1995 in Minnesota. So she can't be asked now. And that was a whole separate, just horrible tragedy. She was also a beautiful young girl it was just sad. Her killer was caught right away, but it's just sad.
So do you think that Teresa, they were using her to say that it was Teresa and not Joni to distance themselves from Joni, and that Teresa went along with it?
Yes, and I don't know if Teresa went along with it or not. Her sister later, Robin, was in contact with me at some point years and years ago, and she told me that it wasn't Teresa that day. It wasn't Teresa, but I don't know if she ever went to law enforcement and said that. I passed it on to law enforcement, but that doesn't mean, I know that her sister Robin said that it wasn't Teresa.
On Thursday, nearly a full week after Joan's disappearance, Deputy Bash says he spent the morning and afternoon knocking on doors around the mini-mart with Chief Humphrey.
The canvass was done at least a week after she disappeared.
So this is like door knocking?
Yes, in downtown Warrenton.
In these files, there would be a critical interview with a business owner named Carl Hurd. He was the owner of a pizzeria, which was by the mini-mart. And on October 7th, 1983, so a week after Joni's disappearance, Carl tells Deputy Bash that he was certain he saw a girl that matched Joan's description walking by the pizzeria. And then almost immediately after she passed, he watched Joan Hall turn around and come back, almost running to the corner, where she met with a young man, who she then talked to for about 5 minutes, before going across the street to the north end of the club, and then she disappeared with him. That this exchange happened at 3 p.m. According to Dean, the description of this young man matches Mike Moore, the student who said he dropped off Joni at the mini-mart at 2:10 p.m.
Mike Moore, who was one of her classmates, drove her down to the mini-mart. She wanted to get a soda before she walked to the Warrenton grade school to help her aunt do after-school tutoring, which she did all the time. It's a regular route. She went into the mini-mart by herself while Mike Moore talked to another boy. There's an eyewitness that saw her go in, so you know that happened. Another classmate named Mike saw her do that.
Mike Davis would be interviewed, and he would say that he did see Joan enter the mini-mart and that he talked to Mike Moore outside the store. After that, he went inside, and he had no idea where Mike Moore went or what he did after they had briefly talked outside the store. There were 2 witnesses inside the mini-mart that document that Joni did go inside the store and that she did buy a bottle of Coke.
She came out the front of the mini-mart. She turned west, which is towards Main Avenue, which would be the way you would go if you were walking to the grade school. She walked south on Main Street, and right in back of the mini-mart, it was a pizzeria. And the pizzeria was owned by a fellow by the name of Carl Hurd, a middle-aged guy who did not know Joan Hall or any of these other kids that were involved here. He saw her walk by his pizzeria at exactly the time that she would have been from the mini mart. So there's a second eyewitness. He said she walked by and he was cleaning up after the lunch hour. So he looked right out at her. He saw her walk by and then quickly return to the corner and talk to another young man that he said that he thought she was a friend of his. They talked for about 5 minutes. He describes that boy as, and I think this is an important description, as 5'5", sandy-haired, and about 20 years old. With the exception of him being 18 instead of 20 at the time, that's almost an exact description of Mike Moore, the boy that drove her down to the mini mart. He said that they talked for about 5 minutes, then they crossed Main Avenue and went around the corner. There was a restaurant called the Club Restaurant. It's no longer there. And then they turned the corner and went out of view. And so over the years. So
and that was the last time that anybody saw her?
Yeah, until the more recent lead that came about, and which the lead comes from right around the corner at the right time. And over the years, though, if you read the press accounts, various newspaper articles, other things, they all say the same thing, and including the then district attorney and sheriff who would say these things publicly. They said she went to the mini mart and we never saw her again. And that's just not true. She went to the mini mart, she turned west, she went south on Main. The pizzeria guy saw her. He identified her by photo because he didn't know her. She spoke to somebody at the corner that she knew well, walked across the street and out of view. Okay, that would have been very helpful information to know all these 40 years. And that was really not available to the public.
What also wasn't available to the public is a potential witness.
Dee is part of a vast group of very committed people, most of them from the Warrington, Astoria area, who have dug out all kinds of leads that have never been interviewed before over 40 years. And there's one lead in particular that's not public yet. The sheriff's investigating it right now. That probably could have solved the case the first week, but it was buried. There was actually a note in the file that Gerald Bash had written, but it did not appear in his official police report.
And so, what did the note say?
Well, I really don't feel like it's under investigation right now, so I'm hoping.
Yeah.
I don't want to compromise their
So
effort.
it's not in the files that if it's in the files, I'll have it. But is it in those files or no?
It is in the files.
It's in the file.
It's hard to put it together if you didn't have the lead, which the lead was generated by all of the information that Dina Rush has posted on her website, and that triggered a person that knew the person who had the information. And then when you have that name, you can go back through the files and put it together. And it was actually a Gerald Bash note in the file that identified that. Had that information been available at the time, well, you'll find out later.
So then the person who came forward recently didn't know that the information that they had was really important.
Yeah, I would describe it this way without betraying the confidences. I would say that he did feel like it was important. He did report it, and it wasn't acted on. So anyway, there was actually a lot of information in these police reports, even the one written by Gerald Bash, and that wasn't available to the public and would have. I think it brings, when it goes all public like that, especially in a small town like Warrington where people really do care about this case. Mm-hmm. I think it would have prompted memories, and people would have said, I could fill this detail in that, and that's what's happening now.
Okay, so I went through 490 pages of documents, and I couldn't find what Dean was talking about, which means we will absolutely keep you posted on the Joan Hall case. And stick around for our bonus content. Here, my co-host Brandon Morgan and I discuss the case. And if you have a minute, head on over to Apple Podcasts and rate and review the show. Tell a friend. We'd really appreciate it. And as always, thank you so much for listening. From Cloud 10, Criminal Mischief is a pie-in-the-sky production recorded in the beautiful Pacific Northwest. We're produced by Brandon Morgan and myself, music by Soundstripe. I'm Carolyn Osorio, your writer and host.